And we have 8 panellists now, including the Mayor and Stephen. It's going to be tough, so we're not going to ask each of the panellists to reply to every group of questions, but we'll have at least 4 panellists initially answering the questions that are put from the floor. So would anybody like to go first on an issue on transport and... Again, a smiler, lots of...
Can you say their names?
Yeah, can you say your name out, please?
Yeah, hi, it's Brian Mills from Sawston. We have a local liaison forum meeting tomorrow night, and I'd like to invite James to come along to see what's going on in terms of a consultation with the Greater Cambridge Partnership. We've had 3 meetings so far. The meeting tomorrow is... Well, it's a governance issue. It's a transport issue. It's all about transport. We're delaying the decision that we're being offered because the data wasn't there in terms of traffic flow. If you'd like to come along and you can see what a relative fiasco it is.
Thank you. Another question, gentleman here. It's going to be a random selection of 5 people here. What's it?
Hi, I'm Andrew Sangster. I'm a resident and business owner here in Cambridge City. But I grew up in Burwell. Is that better? I'm whistling something to...
Oh dear.
Shall I go in the front? Is that better? Is that better? Yeah. Okay, oh, there we go. Okay, so my name's Andrew Sangster. I'm a resident and... I'm going back in the front. Okay, I'll go in the front.
Must be a speaker. Oh, it's a speaker.
Okay,
yeah.
So I'm Andrew Sangster. I'm a resident business owner here. And James, I have to say, I really came here as a sceptic. I really wasn't expecting to support this, what you're pushing through. But I grew up in a working class household in Burwell, and I have to say you're the first politician I've come across actually speaks to where my people come from, and actually doing something for people I grew up with and actually going to make meaningful change. There are lots of waffle about all environmental stuff, and that's terrific. The thing I would ask is to do with the transport issue. In terms of the short-term projects, and the chap from Sawston just raised some of them, can we have an assurance that we're going to do something about these smaller issues? I live in Long Road. It's a big issue with the Waitrose Junction. Can we have some sort of focus on these marginal gains as well as these bigger issue projects?
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks very much, and we really have to restrict it to no more than 60 seconds in a question.
Thank you. Chris Rand, I'd just like to ask the panel what their short to medium term plans would be, because, clearly there are the idea of the light rail and the tunnelling is fantastic. I'm all for looking into that, but we're going to have problems to solve before then, which Edward Lee has certainly touched on. So what particular specific things should we be looking at in the medium term? There are some very quick gains to be made as well.
Thank you. We'll go to this side of the room. Somebody who wanted to ask a question to the Mayor before.
Thank you. Hello, my name's Alison Power. I do a blog about Mill Road in Cambridge, and my day job involves advising graduates who are looking to move to the Cambridge area about where they could live and travel and how they could get to work. So I'm particularly concerned about what I've read in the press about the busway that would go from Cambridge to Camborne, because that seems to be considering the needs of a number of houses, or up to 15,000 houses, I believe, that are yet to be built. But having looked at the villages just west of Cambridge, there's 22 villages there with a population of around 23,000. And of those, only 3,000 people live in villages where there's a bus service that's commutable to the Science Park, to the Cambridge Business Park and St John's Innovation Centre, and they could get into Cambridge to spend their hard-earned cash in the nighttime economy. So I just want to ask the panel, do they feel that we actually need to look at prioritising the needs of existing residents before we look at all the houses that are coming?
Thank you. Great. I said I'd be impartial, but living in that area, I agree. So this, the gentleman at the back, who was going to speak for, you last minute.
How's that? Yes, my name's Alex Reed. I'm a former county councillor. I was extremely impressed with James Palmer's proposal for the land value cap, because it seems to me it could both make more affordable housing available, but also generate funds for light rail. he mentioned that it would be a radical proposal and would need an act of Parliament. My question is there anything we as residents could do to help him achieve that objective?
Thank you very much. Bev, you don't want to ask?
No, I was going to, but someone else has asked
Okay.
the question.
My question is for Wendy and Colin, and I'm going to get up a little bit. I'm Marie Claire, I live around the corner, and I probably could live anywhere in the world, and my children and I live here because we think it's one of the best places ever, and we'd like it to stay that way and to grow sustainably. And I was wondering if Wendy and Colin, maybe Rod as well in terms of governance plans, and Stephen, I know you've got some thoughts on that, could talk about what sort of Cambridge our children would be looking for. I do think that if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, and you could end up some really bad places. So I'd love to hear about the long-term plans and the future. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's the first question for the third group of questions. Okay, so we'll come back to them. Transport now. Anything specifically on transport that hasn't been asked that's going to put the panel under pressure? Okay.
I'm Peter Landsoffer, resident of Newnham. In London, actually, there are more journeys by bus than there are by tube. And in Newnham, we're not going to be near the light rail. At the moment, we have one bus an hour, which is such a poor service that nobody uses it. So how are you going to solve the problems of those who are not near the light rail?
Thank you very much. Those kind of questions, short and pithy and to the point.
I'm Sue Hughes. I live in the middle of Cambridge.
This light's really effective.
Sorry, it's when you're on the loudspeaker.
I live in the centre of Cambridge, and I was interested in one of the speakers who said that the bus wouldn't stop wherever it would stop because Stagecoach won't do it. We're going to need buses until all these wonderful things come in. What are we going to do about Stagecoach? What are you going to do about Stagecoach?
Very good question.
Bob Skelton, commute from Ely to West Side. Again, buses. Can we do anything to persuade Stagecoach to replace their current city fleet by modern hybrid vehicles?
Okay, one more.
Ian Rawls, Cambridge Friends of the Earth. Is it really easier to tunnel under the city than maybe make the park and ride free again and maybe introduce a congestion charge for vehicles coming into the city? Or are we totally at the whim of Stagecoach?
Your last question from Marcus.
Yeah, just a quick question. How can we avoid that the busway is ran through the West Fields with the promise of a tram or light rail, when in reality, after 2 years, the money might dry up and we end up with the busway permanently across the West Fields?
Thank you very much. So that's the questions on transport and those broader issues.
Should I ask the question on transport?
Okay, question from the panel on transport. Well, then you don't get to answer it.
No, I don't intend to answer it. I want to know, I mean, in relation to Stagecoach, why is it that there's been no investigation of setting up a locally owned public bus company? Lots of other cities have them. Nobody seems to get round to the fact that we're at the whim of private sector operators. We could do it ourselves. Why haven't we done that?
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So what I suggest now, what we'll do is I'll pass to James Palmer to start with, to kick us off. Then I think we'll return to Rod has expressed an interest ahead of the meeting in replying on transport, and then maybe Colin, if you'd like to, and then other panellists. Yeah? So first to James.
Right, I've been frantically scribbling down these questions, so I will carry on. I will answer a few, and I'll let you jump in when you're bored of me. I'll first go on buses and Stagecoach. I know how popular Stagecoach are. Everywhere I go, people say, you could not possibly improve on the current system, James. Please, 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 can we have more Stagecoach delivery? Well, look, I'm really honest with you, as I always am, or try to be. I don't know anything about buses. I've never run a bus company. I don't know how they work. I've got no idea. of the current situation. I can see that the system we have in the county and in Peterborough, by the way, it's not just down here, is not serving the public. So what I've suggested is that we have a review of bus service in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, an independent review, not carried out by Stagecoach, and that will give us some pointers as to where we can go and how we can improve the service. We intend to get on with that pretty quickly, so I hope that that will give us a better service across the county. I will say though, and it was mentioned about bus journeys in London, the buses in London are subsidisation of £800 million a year. We simply do not have that kind of finance. So there has to be some kind of reality and realism. If we were to put a complete 100% perfect bus service across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, it would use all of our money and much more and much more and much more and much more. So we have to provide the solutions that are realistic and affordable. We have less than a 13th of the population of Greater London and 3 times the size of the land area. So, but we will be having a review of Stagecoach. Parish meeting, thank you very much for inviting me. Perhaps a little bit more time, a bit more in advance than tomorrow. But
I suggest you go to one of the local liaisons.
I'm very happy to do so. Please send me an invite. My diary is as full as you would expect. If you perhaps give me 3 or 4 weeks' notice, I'm more likely to make it. Okay. So, but yes. Is tunnelling easier than park and ride? Well, I've got a shovel if you've got the time, but is it easier than park and ride? Of course, it isn't the only solution, but it's a solution that is necessary. I don't know if you use park and ride or if you travel into the city by car. Believe you me, I would rather get on a train to come to Cambridge than I would drive in. But at the moment, the park and ride option from my hometown, from Seoul, I've told you already the greatest place on earth, from my hometown, I have to fight to get into Cambridge, and the Newmarket Road Park and Ride, I'm already here. I'm already in the city. There's no point in me saying, oh, well, I'll get on a bus now, because the bus will take me, actually, by the time I parked, waited for the bus, got on the bus, got into the centre of town, I could drive in and park. So if you're going to put park and ride somewhere, you know, we either have them further out, or we, you know, you've got to give people a choice. You've got to give them an option, and I think that tunnelling is an option and it's a choice. I'm not saying that everything has to be thrown away that's here, but I do think we have to plan for the future, and tunnelling is a better option that can transport more people.
One more point, James? One
more point. I think there's several on buses, so they're all sort of covered in that same one. Avoid the busway across the West Fields. So the question was, if the busway is put in short term across the West Fields, will it just be left? What I would say to that is, I'll go back to the speech I made earlier, which is about growth and the necessity of providing housing across the whole of the area. Now, the simple fact of the matter is, the shortage of housing we have in the county now is not going to be solved by, you know, a short-term plan. I'm not saying that the busway wouldn't improve things for a certain amount of time. I think it would. What I'm saying to you is the need for new housing beyond Camborne to St.Its, and the need for people to get in from beyond Camborne and St.Its is not going to go away. So what I would say to you is, even if the busway was put in the short term, I still think there would need to be a longer term solution. However, I will say the same as I said when I was speaking to you earlier. The decision on the busway is made next June, it's not made tonight. Okay?
Thank you, James. And Rod, would you like to...
Let me just touch on buses. I think Stagecoach is an apt name, because I think the bus service is a bit like the Wild West at the moment in relation to delivery of buses in the area. And that's against a backdrop of material cuts by the County Council in terms of bus provision. Now, many people in our area don't own a private vehicle and rely on public transport to get about. So actually, I welcome James's review of buses, but I would encourage him to go further, and actually the Mayor has the power to bus franchise. And actually bus franchising will transform the provision of normal buses on normal roads across the area. And actually that is a short-term solution for some of the issues we have in terms of our ability to get around, people in villages coming into city and so forth. So that is an important plank in terms of short-term solutions for solving the transport problems. I think there's another point though, that actually other short-term solutions which are quick fixes are within the power of the combined authority and the Greater Cambridge Partnership. Looking at on-street parking, providing free park and ride as an individual identified earlier on, ensuring that those park and ride buses aren't diesel but electric. London has bought 70 electric buses, why can't we? So that actually those short-term interventions enables us to buy time to look at other schemes such as light rail, such as the bullet bus.
Fine, thank you very much. And over to Colin, very quick, yeah? We get one other panelist in there.
Sure. There were a number of questions about short-term versus long-term, so just focusing on the short-term first. I think one of the most important things is that short-term solutions don't compromise the solutions that are right for the long-term. So anything that is done in the short-term, we should look at that carefully and make sure that it doesn't close off better options for the future. So that's the first point. In practical terms, I would say the Girton interchange should be a priority for the short term. It's a key point on the strategic road network. I realise it's not meeting my immediate objective of light rail, but it would key into that for the long term. So that would be a priority. So another key point perhaps is that we don't see light rail as the answer to everything. It needs to integrate with other forms of transport, so heavy rail, buses of course, and in the future it's going to be autonomous vehicles are going to be increasing, so we do need park and rides where autonomous vehicles could go to those, but also cycling and walking. I think the question was asked about how do I get to the light rail stop from Newnham. Well, my suggestion would be if we have a network of stops, you could cycle or walk to the nearest stop on the network. In fact, we've done an analysis of the network that we've created, and we can show that 90% of the city would lie within an 8-minute cycle ride or a 20-minute walk of a stop on the network that we're suggesting. So, in fact, even though light rail is a backbone of public transport, it would be designed in a way that you could connect into it from employment and residential centres.
Great, thank you very much. Panel, we've got one quick chance for somebody else. If you do talk on this, you won't talk in the next one. So who would like to talk?
What's the next one then?
Tui.
Hi, I think it was you that asked about whether we shouldn't be looking at solutions for the existing residents before looking at those coming. I quite agree with you. One of the issues we have west of Cambridge is the fact that in the mornings, those who are commuting into Cambridge or to the business parks in the south of the city have to navigate through Madinley Rise. Frankly, it takes perhaps, 30 minutes, 35 minutes just to do a 2-3 mile route, and that is not good. And the county has known about this problem for ages. But because of this lack of understanding of the requirements, exactly what I was saying earlier on, we find that the problem has just been getting worse. Now, the only reason we've got the A428 Carpen to Cambridge busway coming in is because they want to put another nearly 6,000 houses on West Camborne and Bonnier-Field. And that isn't going to solve the existing problem, not when you've got more coming in. So the governance is a big thing. And hence my saying we need to work better together, understand the needs, and solving the problem we already have now without compounding it by an old system.
Thanks, Dewey. And Edward says he doesn't want to talk on anything else except transport, so...
I can answer some of the questions just very quickly. Franchising is certainly part of the answer. It's actually one of the reasons why we can't have our own bus service. The Bus Services Act forbids local authorities setting up their own bus services now. But it would, in fact, the Stagecoach is dead against franchising actually probably tells us that it probably is the right thing to be doing. Now, the question about how making bus services work for residents now, The problem that we have is that we run bus services to serve two different purposes at the same time. One is to provide a social service for people who have limited mobility, who don't have a car, and who need the buses to come close to them. We're also trying to provide a service which is competitive with driving. In other words, this is convenient and quick and as straightforward as driving. We cannot do both with the same service. So we actually have to develop a network of express services that get you quickly from A to B, connecting with social services that get you in from the villages to hubs that allow you to travel quickly in. And it's that model that will make bus services work for people outside the city and inside the city much better than they do now. To answer the question about what we do in the medium term, an interesting statistic, so there's a survey done of 1,000 people in the local area along the A428 corridor. 38% indicated that they would use a segregated cycleway from Camborne to Cambridge to commute into Cambridge and to use it for leisure trips, as against 36% who said that they would use the busway. That tells me that actually investing in building a segregated, convenient, direct cycleway would actually be a much better investment for money, and it would see much more use than a busway.
Thank you. Great. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, thanks very much to the panellists. We're going to move on now to the second group of questions. I'm guessing that we don't need quite so many questions on this one, but it's on the issues of governance and management of development in our sub-region. So it's a question where you can raise questions, you can also ask for further clarifications from the Mayor or others. Yes, please.
Roger Tomlinson, Carpen Parish Council. Rod Cantrell's referred to the democratic deficit. What I actually feel is that we're actually kind of living in a failing state. Local government has been letting us down in Cambridgeshire and Cambridge for a number of years, and I think that's in many ways the elephant in the room. We've seen development in Cambridge of extremely poor quality. CB1 is a classic example of that. The leisure park around the junction is another. And we're still being offered cheap jack, out of date, yesterday's problems for tomorrow. Local government has to be reorganised, and I'm hoping that the Mayor's review will lead to a decent structure that will make a difference.
Thank you very much. Well put. Any other one? You've asked already one question, so gentleman at the back.
Can I ask the Mayor what is likely to be the time scale of an Act of Parliament to allow a cap on the same land?
Did everybody hear that okay? A time scale. What is the time scale for a cap on the price of land? The Act of Parliament and everything that goes with it. Okay, the central issue. Did you want to?
Thank you. Michael Kilpatrick from Whittlesford. How can we ever have any sort of sensible governance and planning in this country when we have such an ad hoc and arbitrary development of governing bodies that we have seen around here, where we have a new combined authority which is only 15% bigger than Cambridgeshire County Council, an extra almost redundant tier, and the Greater Cambridge Partnership as another layer on top of the city and the district councils. And how can we possibly have any sort of good government with a body which has no directly elected opposition?
Thank you very much. Any other points that anybody would like to raise? One last question over here. Or unless somebody wants to put their hand up and ask a question about consultation and participation. We might take an extra question on that.
Hello, David Bridges. I'd like to know who's managing all this economic growth. There seems to be an assumption shared by almost every member of the panel that economic growth is highly desirable, for which I'd have more sympathy if we were faced with high levels of unemployment in Cambridge, which I don't think we are. And yet, in almost every case, people are blaming economic growth for the problems that they're now trying to solve, and the solutions all seem to require more economic growth. Is this totally out of control? Does anybody have a view of any limitations on this growth?
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Just say who you are if you would.
Jean Hughes, and I live in Coton, actually adjoining the Westfields. And my worry, does any consideration being given to the wildlife in the fields?
Thank you very much. We'll come back to that one. Let's save the answer to that for the next session on environmental issues. One file, it is on consultation? Okay.
Jackie Sutton Adam. I'm a business owner in Cambridge, and I also do work for Transition Cambridge. It's a voluntary group. In recent months, the GCP and the previous guys, the Greater City Deal, have been widely criticised for a lack of consultation with members of the public. They have produced minutes for meetings at the very last minute. They've produced agendas for meetings with very little notice. They haven't given much notice for meetings that have happened, and many of those meetings are happening in secret. And I'd like to ask the Mayor whether, in his review of the City Deal and GCP, will he be addressing the way in which that body responds to residents' concerns and worries about what's happening, and how he will make them talk to us, for God's sake.
Great, thank you very much indeed. It looks like it's you again, James.
Yes, right, okay. Roger, I can't remember Roger somewhere. Hello, Roger. Local government is letting us down. You hope the review will sort it out. Well, obviously, not all of local government is letting you down. I mean, local government does an awful lot of good. I think we can see that every part of our setup does a certain job and does some of it very, very well. I think the problem is there is too much local government. This is something that I've been saying for since before the position of the mayor was even sort of a speck in George Osborne's eye. So it's not something that's new to me. I agree with you that local government in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough is too heavy, and I think that there's too much of it. Do I think that we could be leaner and more efficient? Yes, I do. And that's why we're having an independent review. But it is important that the review is not just Mr. Mayor saying, well, this is what's going to happen. You know, we don't live in a dictatorship. We live in an area where we're all electors and we all have a vote, and it's important that the review is a fair and independent review. So the review I will put forward will be run by an independent person and be transparent, as you would all expect. But I do believe that the cost of local government is too high, and I believe that we could be investing more into adult social care, for example, across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough than we currently are, because of the cost of local government. So there's work that can be done. I hope that the transparent review, and I believe the transparent review, will bring forward a better governance for the county. The time scale of an Act of Parliament on the land cap. I'm glad that the question was asked, because the last question on the land cap was not answered, which was how could you support a land cap? Somebody over there asked the question. Well, the way you can support it is write to your local MP, and also write to the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, Sajid Javid, and tell him that you support the land cap. We are having an economic commission that will work on lots of the things that we're doing with the Combined Authority, and it will bring forward a clear and a clarified position on the land cap, which is more than me just spouting figures at you in a hall, and it will have the actual mathematics behind it. So, but I suggest to you, if it's something that you agree with and you believe that capping land value and bringing that value back into the public purse for infrastructure and housing is something that's a positive, then to write to your local MP. Now, when it comes to an Act of Parliament, we are in a Parliament of uncertainty, I think you'll agree. However, I do know, certainly the leader of the City Council and I agree on the potential for a land cap. There were some words in the Labour manifesto that mentioned grabbing land value. We know that work's been done by government. I think the uplift in the value of the land below Crossrail is 32 billion, which is some significant portion more than the £13 billion or so that Crossrail has cost. So there is evidence that shows that land cap works. It isn't all about single party politics. I believe if I can work with our two Labour MPs in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and with my Labour colleague at the City Council, and we can put together a combined authority position which is backed cross-party, it's got much more chance of getting through government more quickly. And I will say this, I'm a very impatient man. I don't like waiting around, and I don't like the process and the time that things take to go through government and through local government. It's hellishly frustrating, and I'm sure you see that. I certainly do. So I will be pushing and pushing and pushing and making sure that our voice is heard in government. Yes, one more?
One more, yeah.
One more. Okay. David Bridges, I'll do one that's slightly more difficult for a free marketeer Conservative to answer, perhaps in this room, than maybe it would be some others. Who's managing economic growth? Is it out of control? Well, if you believe in a free market, as I do, I don't believe that the problem is out of control. I think we are extraordinarily fortunate to have a world-leading centre. And of course, what we have, if you have a world-leading centre, success goes to success, and that's the situation we are in. How do you manage that? Well, I think the very discussions we're having this evening are exactly about managing economic growth and how you spread that wealth across the whole of the area rather than have it concentrated in a very small part. And I believe in creating a fairer Cambridgeshire, and I believe that we can spread the wealth of Cambridgeshire beyond the South Cambs region and Cambridgeshire region and take advantage of all those people in the county and beyond can take advantage of what we have. Okay.
Thank you very much. Stephen Coates.
Yeah, I mean, I think your point about growth is actually a very intelligent one and a very valid one. The issue is that there are people in this city who believe that we should become a city of 1 million people. I'm sorry to say that I've attended some events where I've heard people typically linked to Cambridge Ahead saying, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had 1 million people and if we were the next Birmingham? And I can tell you, I also was brought up in Cambridge, and I'll say right now that's a vision I find extremely unattractive. Let's move on to governance now, quickly, because this is not the time for speeches. But part of the problem, one of the reasons we're here tonight, I mean, the first question is, where is Lewis Herbert? Well, guess what, he was here, but he's now left the room, because he didn't want to stay to hear the end of what we had to say. And that has been our experience throughout this process. Somebody who does not listen. We have had 70% of people say we don't want a busway, and they've carried on. They're going to the board meeting next week. So that is a very important civic issue, and it's an institutional issue, and I'll say this as my last point, which is there is a smoke and mirrors thing going on here, where people say, there's the mayor, there's all these different groups in terms of governance. But the reality is there is one common theme in some respects, is that there are also, this is a key governance point, more and more the introduction of things like local enterprise partnerships, business quangos, non-resident organisations that are saying we have to grow at a breakneck speed. And do you know what? That is great news for the landowners. And all I'm saying to you, all of you guys here tonight, is make your voice heard. Don't just lie back, because we are entitled to our voice as residents.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Stephen. Toomey, on behalf of South Cambs and herself.
Thank you. There was a comment or a question about growth being out of control, and that we're blaming growth and then trying to make more growth to solve the growth problem. I don't think we are. I think what we are is realistic about exactly what is happening. We have a university which is world class, which is almost like churning out, great things and great people and companies that keep growing from work that has been done in the university. You cannot cap that growth without doing something like not doing more work in the university. That is what is generating the growth. So capping it is going to be difficult. But what we can do is manage that growth and try and open up other areas, not just the city, but South Cambs, but also potentially places like Fenland, where people can go to live and you can build and afford the houses there. So we're not blaming growth. we accept the growth will happen, we cannot cap it, but what we can do is manage it properly. And I think that's where the governance and the mayor comes in terms of it's the overall layer now, overall the layers of government that we have.
And I think what we're also saying is we want to have confidence that the people who are managing the growth know what our priorities are, and that we want to live in a beautiful place, and that it's also that it's about the sense that we don't want to be losing everything. It wants to have, it's going to be sustainable. So let's think about joined up thinking about, how do you create a green, sustainable city? How do you integrate landscape design into schemes right from the start? So people need to have confidence, and that's what people in the city don't have at the moment, because they look at what's being done in the schemes that have been done already, and they think they're shoddy. They think the quality is really poor. But it doesn't have to be like that. In Germany, they're building motorways with green roofs and allotments and meadows. Why can't we have that? We've got a world-class city. Why can't we have that?
Great, thank you very much. What I'll do with the permission of the panel is move on, hang on a second, on to the final set of questions. And I think the way it's gone, we've been a bit random in the past, we'll continue to be. Questions on anything else that you'd like to raise. We'll take questions for about 5 minutes and then pass it over to the panel, starting with the panellist who has kindly said nothing so far. Terry. Okay, great, so this time. Yeah, you can have a mic.
About the idea that local government is heavy.
Okay.
It is absolutely nonsense to say that local government is too heavy. We've been living in an era where local government would be absolutely hollowed out by austerity cuts and so on, and we're in a position in this area where social care, children's services and children's centres are being decapitated, and the idea that local government is too heavy is the reverse of the truth.
Thank you very much. And can we now go to wider questions on environmental, other broader issues, housing issues, things that haven't been spoken about. So we'll do the two people in this row.
My name's Jean Hewitt. I live in a city. I don't know much about local government, but I'd like to know what the influence is of the landowners that own the Greenbelt, the university and the colleges, and the Rothschilds, that company that is advising them, Bidwells. We don't feel we have a voice, but we do feel there are very strong influences.
Thank you very much.
Sam Davis, city resident. The whole discussion about infrastructure so far has really revolved around transport and about housing. But as the mother of 2 teenage children in this city, I think there's a lot of other dimensions to infrastructure that make life here worth living and make it an attractive place for people to bring their families. And I think we're in danger of building a 2-tier city, because the science parks, as we saw with the interview with Jeanette Walker at the science park the other day, the science parks were able to afford to put in swimming pools, gyms, creches. The rest of the city is struggling with the dual impact of austerity and the hollowing out that goes on once demand is diverted to the exclusive facilities on the science parks. How can we address these two pernicious effects?
Thank you very much.
Antony Carpen, local resident, also filming tonight. Really an appeal to the mayor when he does his studies to commission a historical look back, because I spend lots of my time in archives and some of the things there are absolutely fascinating. Second, again, is an appeal to have a systematic process to consult with schools and colleges, and thirdly, again, another appeal to work with the leisure service providers and link them up with public transport, because the data of where a lot of their customers come from, I think aligning some of our future transport plans around the services that they provide could make them more sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Laura Doherty. Oh. Laura Doherty. I live in one of the northern villages and commute into the city centre. An awful lot of the discussion seems to have revolved around the idea that people will be living some distance out and commuting in. And there are already lots and lots of problems with that, and there isn't really very much space in the city centre for businesses to grow. So surely for new businesses we should be thinking about locations perhaps in the Cambridge area to take advantage of the university ideas and so on, but not shipping everybody into the middle of the city. And also touching on the point that someone else made about families, not shipping all the young people from the northern villages out to Long Road and Hills Road. What about education centres, you know, in the areas that are not well served at the moment?
Thank you.
Hello. What would really help would be a map showing what area is covered by the Greater Cambridge or Greater Cambridgeshire City Deal, because I just don't know. I've looked on their website and there is no map. There's a Cambridge City and a blob around it, but it doesn't say which villages it does or doesn't cover. So some people are not sure, are they included in this area? Does the funding cover them or not? So I think a great start to help us all with the vision for Greater Cambridge or Cambridgeshire, whichever it is, because both mentioned on the website, would be a clarification and a map that just says what it is and what area it covers.
Thank you very much. And a final question here.
Should residents of Cambridge tolerate having non-elected bodies on the Greater Cambridge Partnership, to it the local enterprise partnership and the university, deciding on the shape of the city when they've clearly got huge vested interests, huge financial interests?
Oh, sorry. Well, I apologize. There's one final question now.
Okay, well, I'm Jim Chisholm. I'm probably better known as a cycling campaigner. But 40 years ago, I was working at the leading edge, or sometimes the bleeding edge, of transport research. And I realised that basically the growth of car travel was unsustainable. And of course, people had discovered that long before me. And of course, this links transport, environment, and planning. So we have the issue whereby the more cars we permit, the more congested it becomes, and the less efficient the cars become. But the more public transport we have, the more efficient it becomes, and the less congestion we have. It seems that we do seem too much, even in terms of having park and ride sites, that we're still encouraging the growth of cars when that is the things that are damaging the environment and not encouraging the other modes.
Thank you. Great. Well, they're very, very interesting questions. We've now got 15 minutes until we have to close, so I'll pass it to the panel for final comments. Terry. You're going with the last one, is that right?
Okay, thanks very much. A lot of these questions are actually related to each other in terms of growth and the impact on the community, and there seems a kind of mismatch in many people's perceptions, particularly I would say, James, that this idea that we all buy into, the idea of growth is the engine of absolutely everything and will create good solutions for everyone, I think unfortunately is completely misguided, certainly when it comes alongside, as that gentleman pointed out earlier, a sort of hollowing out of public services through austerity cuts. It's true, there is a democratic deficit inside the Greater Cambridge Partnership. It is run, there are people there who have huge vested interests, stand to make enormous amounts of money out of this what I would call a corporate juggernaut in Cambridge. And it's all dressed up in the guise of growth is good. But actually, it's not actually. It's self-motivated, it's for personal and corporate gain. And what we need is to reassess, is the gross domestic product the actual be-all and end-all? Isn't life really about quality? Isn't it about swimming in the river? Isn't it about access to Grantchester Meadows and places to walk? That's what life is about. It's not about corporate juggernaut, who can earn the most. We've already seen the impact of that inside Cambridge. It's hollowing out Cambridge itself. Parkside Police Station, they're talking about closing that because they can't afford to run it. County Hall, your friends at County Hall are talking about selling it off. What are we going to use County Hall for? They're talking about turning it into a hotel. These are important public assets that are part of the public realm, that make us citizens of Cambridge, make us feel proud, make us feel democratically involved, and it's being hollowed out. It's a great danger, and I hope people, Cambridge Commons is absolutely challenging the growth agenda. Please join us. You'll find our website, and come and join and come and talk, and we'd be very pleased to hear from you.
Thank you, Derek. We'll give each panellist a couple of minutes to make any final points they want now. So, Wendy.
Well, I'd just like to say something. You've got cash-strapped local services, and I think you're very dependent on, strong civic voice and, and voluntary bodies. And I think, certainly as chair of the Residents' Association of Cambridge, I'd like to see some more support for resident groups and voluntary organisations, because actually local government needs us, and we need that sense of pride about where we live. And I've just come back from a holiday in Denmark, a small island, Bornholm in the Baltic, which is bursting with civic pride. It's got flowers, plants, fields planted with borders of wildflowers, and they've been ecologically minded since the 18th century. We just need some joined-up thinking, is what we're all saying. We've got lots of bright people in this city, and we haven't got joined-up thinking. No strategic thinking about the city.
Rod.
I think at the heart of the debate this evening is around the relationship between you, the public, and those bodies that are representing you and delivering for you in terms of infrastructure and growth. And that is it. It's the heart of the issue. It's whether or not you are confident that they are really representing you. And my point is that I don't believe that the residents of Cambridge or the surrounding area are confident at this point. And we still have a chance. Time is not too late for us to stop the clock and reset so that democratic deficit is eroded, so that actually the people who represent you, people you elect, you can actually throw out at the ballot box if they don't do what you want them to do. And the problem we have now is we have a structure which doesn't do that. So organisations will take decisions, and actually you may shout and you may scream, and a lot of you are, and I encourage you to keep doing it, but actually they will ignore you because they believe for the greater good, and they're imposing growth. And actually the reality is that the city will grow. We've been growing for centuries. We will grow. But all the people I speak to, they want to have that growth on a sustainable basis. That growth where a nurse can live in this city, a teacher can live in this city, and that it's not just millionaires or the very, very needy in social housing. And actually, there is an opportunity to do that, but the clock needs to stop and it needs to be reset. And the Mayor does have an opportunity to do that.
Thank you.
Well, I happen to think that the growth is inevitable, that it will continue, and as Rod says, it has taken place, and over the last century the population of Cambridge has doubled. We know that by 2031 it's very likely we will see a 30% growth of population in the South Cambs region. So for me the issue is not about trying to stop growth, it's about planning properly for that growth and developing better solutions. Maybe that comes back to the title of the evening, which was Cambridge Deserves Better. We need to plan better for the future.
I think I'd like to make 2 points. One is about the planning and strategy process. I think what we all experience is that the point at which we get engaged in, say, the local plan or with something to do with a transport project, we put in our ideas, we put in our local knowledge and all the rest of it, and it all gets bounced back to us. Oh no, it's too late for that. No, we've already decided that. And what we discover is that there's this multi-year cycle of looking at the economic strategy, the spatial strategy, the transport strategy, and the point where we get involved, with the point where press releases are going out to announce things, we respond to that, and it's we're 2 years too late. So we have to demand of our councillors to be involved right at the beginning, at the point where objectives are being set, when briefs are being written, not 2 or 3 years down the line, when there's now there's huge filing cabinets full of decisions already made. And the point about the considering not just economic growth is really important. I think that too much of it is led. We're too much of our thinking on transport is about how we get commuters in and out of the city. Actually, commuters only account for about 25% of all trips. So if we solve the commuting problem, there's still going to be 75% of the other trips that we haven't solved. So we have to come up with a solution that serves people who need to go shopping, who want to go to leisure, who want to go to education institutions. And if we come up with a solution that works for all of those people, then it will also work for the commuters. So I think we've just got to be a lot more broad-minded in the way that we approach this whole process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edward.
I think to some extent, I'd just like to say that it's important we don't have a poverty. It's important that we don't have a poverty of ambition. I think it's possible to have the next armed holdings in this city and to make huge sums of money with these things, but also to preserve the landscape, and that is going to require money from central government. Now, my opinion is that London takes too much money. We're getting ripped off. I'm sure you're saying that to Theresa May every day, I hope. And I think we need to get more money, and we need to do things properly. That's my final point.
And to me.
Definitely your elected officials need to be taking your views more into account. It seems that consultations, what they call box-ticking exercises, and somewhere along the line the decision has already been made, but it doesn't stop you as residents continuing to shout as loudly as you possibly can, because things can still change, even after it seems that they have made the decision. I'm one that people know I don't mince my words, I say it as I see it, and I think so should you. Support your local councillors, keep writing to them, emailing them, and things can change with your help.
Yes.
Thank you very much to all the panellists. So finally, I'll pass to James for a final word.
Thank you very much. I just want to come back. There was a point made, I'll move in the middle because it's more polite. There was a point made over here about living out and living in. And there was also a point made about the wildlife on the Westfields down here. Now, Cambridge has grown about 10% in the last 10 years. Greater Cambridge, Cambridge itself is around 120,000 people. Greater Cambridge, those people who use the city as their centre, is around 350,000 people. I think it's extraordinarily important to protect the rural nature of Cambridge itself. I think part of its charm and its beauty is that you can walk from the centre into open fields, or you can get on a punt and go to Grantchester Meadows. All the things that we all know and we all enjoy and we love about the city itself. And of course, as I said, I'm not from Cambridge, but it's my home city. It's where I socialise a lot of the time. It's where my children went to college. It's where they socialise and sometimes don't behave all very well. So, protecting wildlife, protecting the rural setting of Cambridge, I think, is paramount. I would like to see the Westfields become a park, a public park, rather than potentially just farming fields, so that everybody can enjoy that. But when you talk about living out and living in, I think that is key. So you've heard me talk about Haverhill to St.Its and under the city. It's been mentioned tonight that people don't actually come to work in the city. They absolutely don't. Not a great deal, not a great many people work in the very centre of Cambridge, but they have to get through Cambridge to those places of work. They have to get to Granta Park, they have to get to the biomedical campus, they have to get to the Wellcome Trust, they have to get to the Science Park and the Western Campus, and of course we know all of these areas are going to grow. So yes, it is about a solution that means that people can get to and from their places of work, but it's also about creating corridors, and where you create corridors you create both growth at either end and in the middle. There is currently a problem in Camborne. There is an enterprise zone in Camborne that has been a complete failure. Well, why has it been a failure? It's been a failure for the very same reason that people struggle to get from Camborne into work, because people will not travel out to Camborne to go to an enterprise zone because it's too far from the university, from those hubs of education that they're used to being part of. If you speed up the ability for people to move around the city and under the city and to and from science parks and to and from their place of work, you create growth hubs along the area. And what you do is you spread the wealth of Cambridge beyond its current geographical area. Let me give you an example that I was told by a guy called Andy Williams, who some of you may know, who's involved with AstraZeneca. Very, very, very nice guy, very clever guy. And he spoke to me about Ely. I used to be leader of East Cambridge District Council, and he said to me about Ely. He said, when he first came to Cambridge, there was no thought whatsoever and no point opening a science base in Cambridge, because there weren't any scientists there. But as the cost of living in Cambridge has grown, so Ely has become an alternative. So people moved out to the city of Ely. It's 15 minutes by train into Cambridge, of course now into the science park, slightly less than that. Good place to live if you're a scientist to bring up a family. But now there are so many scientists living in Ely that AstraZeneca would consider opening up a science base in the city of Ely. That's called spreading the wealth along a corridor, and that's how you spread the wealth of Cambridge beyond its current geographical limit, which is clearly hampered by the terrible congestion that we all suffer with. So when I talk about spreading the wealth north and building new roads and improving the rail link and putting in infrastructure around the city, that's exactly what it's about. Yes, it's incredibly important to protect this city that we all love. It's incredibly important to make sure that Cambridge stays what it is, a university city in a rural setting. But unlike one or two of the panel, I do accept the growth that we have, and I understand the growth that we have, but it is about managing that growth that we have and making sure that everybody in the surrounding area, not just in the very small area that surrounds Cambridge, but the wider area, and we're not talking huge distances. Peterborough's only 35-40 miles away, Wisbech is 35 miles away. You know, we're not talking huge distances out to Bury St Edmunds or into Norfolk or in Northamptonshire. We're not talking vast distances. What we're talking about is appalling infrastructure that stops people getting around. So we can change it, and I am determined to do everything I can to change it whilst protecting this city. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed to James Palmer for coming tonight, spending the whole time with us. Thank you to the panellists, and thank you to all of you. If there's anybody who felt they didn't get a chance to ask a question, I'm sure we'll be doing this again. Okay? And now we have...